And I can see that the hall is pretty full for a gentleman that I'm a big fan of. I follow him on Twitter, and he's here today. And this spotlight session is titled Surviving in the Middle of Two Worlds. We have with us the motivational speaker, Mr. Devdutt Pattanaik, who is a mythologist, an author, and an illustrator. Before I invite him onto the dais and to intrigue all of you with his stories, I will take this opportunity to introduce Mr. Devdutt Pattanaik. Mr. Pattanaik writes on mythology, which he defines as cultural truths revealed through stories, symbols, and rituals. He lectures on the relevance of both Indian and Western myths in modern life. In the last 25 years, he has authored and illustrated over 50 books, including Book of Ram and Dharmic Leadership. Known for his TED Talk and TV shows like Devlok and Business Sutra, he is also a regular columnist. A medical doctor by training, he spent 15 years of working in the pharma and healthcare industry, but over the past decade has been fully immersed in exploring mythology and sharing its wisdom with the world. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Mr. Devdutt Pattanaik on the stage, and we look forward to a very, very inspiring session. Mr. Devdutt Pattanaik, a warm welcome to you, sir, and over to you.
Hello everyone. Should I speak there or here? This is good, okay. Hi, I'll stand and speak if you don't mind. So my name is Devdutt Pattanaik and I write on mythology. And before I give any talk, I like to sort of define my subject. Because we live in times today where fiction writers who write on mythology call themselves historians. So it's a place of extreme confusion. So let me explain how I see mythology. So to understand mythology is the systematic study of myth. And how do you define myth? If fact is everybody's truth that is determined by measurement and evidence, and fiction is nobody's truth based on fantasy, myth is somebody's truth. And that's the simplest definition I can give you. Myth is somebody's truth. Everyone in this room believes in something. It's what anchors them, and it is their truth. And if you respect other people's truth, you have entered the world of mythology. It doesn't have to be everyone's truth. It doesn't have to be based on measurement. It doesn't have to be based on evidence. It is what you believe in. Some people believe justice exists in the world. Some people don't believe justice exists in the world. Who is right? Some people believe there is equality in the world. Some people believe there is no equality in the world. Who is right? Some people believe there is God in this world. Some people believe there is no God in this world. Who is right? The moment we have conversation on who is right and who is wrong, we end up in a quarrel. We debate. We arm wrestle. The Sanskrit word for this is vivad, because my truth is the truth and your truth is false. The boss's truth is always true. In a negotiation, if you start arguing, you will lose your client. So arguments don't work. You surrender, you submit to whoever is in power. But the moment you walk into a negotiation room saying, I have my truth, everybody in the room has their truth. I can expand my truth by listening to other people in the room. And that is the realm of mythology. It's called, the Sanskrit word for this is called samavad. Not vivad, but samvad. I listen to your truth. And this is the basis of very good negotiations and partnerships. And that is why I use mythology in management. Because management is not about being right or wrong. It is about working with different kinds of people. You have to work with investors, you have to work with shareholders, you have to work with partners, you have to work with laborers, consumers, regulators, government, and everybody has a different point of view. And if you want to be good in negotiations, if you want to have great relationships with people, you need to appreciate other people's truths. This is missing in business today because we have been conditioned to think in a very binary way, 1, 0. And you all are technology people. You all understand all technology is based on binary thinking, 1, 0. Fact, fiction. But life is not like that. Life is not binary. Recently, Elon Musk decided to buy Twitter. And somebody made a very interesting comment. It's a classical case of someone who doesn't know the difference between what is called a clock problem and a cloud problem. A clock can be broken down into tiny pieces. Every bit of the clock is measurable. So if there is a problem in the clock, you can measure it to the finest point and come up with a great solution. But a cloud which exists in this world cannot be broken down into small bits. You can't measure it, you can't predict it, its shape, its size, its movement. And people try, right? There are lots of mathematicians working, trying to figure out clouds. And I'm not talking about the IT cloud. I'm talking about the cloud that you see in the sky. I have to clarify only in an IT conference. Right? Because we are so used to seeing a cloud, we say, acha, I know what cloud you're talking about. Google cloud, this cloud, that cloud. No, which you see in the sky. Clock problem versus cloud problem. And what has happened in the IT world is the world is so full of clocks that we forget that people are clouds. And everyone you hire is a cloud. Your wife is not a clock. Your child is not a clock. Your parent is not a clock. Your boss wants to be a clock. But they're all clouds. We all are clouds. We get grumpy. We think differently. Our moods are different. No matter, you are not a predictable person, even though you have mathematical models of how consumers behave. The fact that COVID struck us is a cloud problem. It is not predictable. The world of STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, looks at the world and converts it into a clock problem. It tells you repeatedly everything is a clock. You have self-help books which transform everything into a 2x2 matrix and say it's a clock, it's a clock, it's a clock, it's a clock. It's not a clock. Your body is not a clock. Your digestive system is not a clock. It functions. It's a cloud problem. And the world of cloud problems is what I address through mythology. Where you start looking at people and try to understand what is it. We look at labor, manpower, resources, but it is not as simple as that. In the conference, many people have commented on the fact that many of the leaders of major IT corporations happen to come from South Asia. And it's obviously a pattern that is significant. And people are asking, what is it? Satya Nadella, Sundar Pichai, these names keep coming. And I keep saying that what is it that they bring to the table? And I think there's one paper which comments on the fact that they have soft skills which differentiate them. It is not the hard skills, because that everybody has. On that level, at that level, in that organization, everybody is smart as far as clock problems are concerned. But cloud problems need a different approach. You need to understand people. IIT doesn't teach you about people. It reduces everything into measurement. IIM, management. You can only manage that which is measurable. You can't measure love. You can't measure anger. You can't measure jealousy. Show me one app that measures, controls, regulates jealousy. So, if you look at people who talk about technology that changes the world, they only talk about problems that they can solve. They never talk about problems that they cannot solve. And that has to be called out. Create an app that will reduce jealousy in the world. And maybe our world will be a better place. Cryptocurrency won't make the world a better place. You will just create a new kind of thief. We call them FTX. Stanford education, MIT. And at the end of it, what are you? Chor. I'm sure they have attended ethics classes and morality classes. I am invited, sir, you should give a lecture on ethics. I'm like, are you saying that by giving a lecture on ethics, I will be able to solve the problem? That's a tick mark. You're a fool. Maybe a billionaire, but still a fool. And this is what the world is facing. Because when I go to an MBA class, and I'm invited by some very prestigious colleges, and I ask them, so shall I talk about contentment? And the professors start laughing. No, sir, don't talk about contentment, talk about ambition. Contentment is a bad word in business schools. Don't be contented, because if you're contented, you will be complacent. We don't want our children to be complacent. We want our children to be ambitious. So I'm going to tell you the story of ambition. Once upon a time, there was, in the epic Mahabharata, there is a character called Bakasura. Bakasura was very hungry. He wanted to eat a lot of food. So he would go to the village and eat whatever was there in the village. And when he didn't get enough food, he would eat people. Exactly the way bosses behave when sales doesn't happen. Right? What does he do when he doesn't get the sales? He starts eating people. In Hindi, we'll say, dimag khata hai. He eats my brains. He chews my brains. In sales, I have observed, whenever the sales will not happen, nobody goes home on time that day. Because if you work hard, somehow magically sales will happen. Bakasura went around making everybody's life miserable until the people said, okay, we have to solve this problem. They went to Bakasura and said, you're randomly attacking us, like, randomly going into anybody's cabin. So let us solve the problem. Let's have a monthly meeting. We will give you the month's food every month right on time. Everything that you need to eat will provide you. And so every month the food of the village would go to him to eat on a bullock cart. He would eat all the food. He would also eat the bullock cart and the cart driver. Which is exactly what happens when you make the presentation at the end of the month. Because no matter how good your presentation is, he is going to find a fault in it. Otherwise, how will his appetite be satisfied? All of those people who are smiling right now, remember, somebody thinks you are the Bakasura. And they have ensured you have come to this conference, so for 3 days they can breathe. And then one day, he kept making everybody's life miserable. A man called Bhima came to the village and he said, I will handle this Bakasura. And of course, Bhima goes, he delivers the food instead of the villagers. He goes and delivers the monthly food. And then he and Bakasura have a fight. He defeats Bakasura, kills Bakasura, drives him away, comes back to the village and says, I've gotten rid of Bakasura. And the villagers are very happy. And he looks at them and says, so what will you give me in return? And they say, all the food we have cooked, you can eat it. So he said, okay, fine, I'll eat it. And then I'll go away. What is stopping another Bakasura from coming? And he says, oh, that's true, another Bakasura can come. He said, yes. He says, why don't you stay in the village? The food that we are supposed to give Bakasura, we'll give it to you, and you protect us from Bakasura. And he says, that's a good idea. And this is how the first business deal was struck. Because Bhima offered security services, which is the big thing right now, right? He said, I will stop Bakasura from coming to the village. Now look carefully at this story. Bakasura is hungry. Bhima is also hungry. But what is the difference between a Bakasura and a Bhim? Bakasura, what is hunger? All living creatures are hungry. Whether it's a plant, whether it's an animal or a human being, all of us are hungry for food. In business school, hunger is called ambition. That's all. Ambition is just hunger. Bakasura is hungry. Bhima is hungry. Bakasura is ambitious. Bhima is ambitious. But there is one difference between the two. Bakasura is only concerned about his hunger. And he says, I will consume everything around me to satisfy my hunger. Bhim says, I am hungry, but people around me are hungry too. How do I create a synergy between my hunger and their hunger? They are hungry for security. I am hungry for food. If I satisfy their hunger for security, they will satisfy my hunger for food. And that is how synergy takes place. I look at your hunger, you look at my hunger. Bakasura is only looking at his own hunger. My hunger, I have to be satisfied. My top line, my bottom line, my revenue, my valuation, my capital, everything is about me. And look at how countries are talking today. Make America great again. Make this country great again. At whose cost? Are we talking about synergies? Or are we talking about my hunger? Because I want to be the top alpha. In all sales conferences that I go, the symbol of success is an alpha predator. An alpha predator. He eats. He doesn't give and receive. Bakasura is an alpha predator. He eats. Bhima exchanges. He gives security to get revenue. He is concerned about the village. He cares. But this is not the way we are taught business in business schools. We are taught you have to create value. And I asked my nephew, what does it mean? What does it mean? He does not talk about exchange. We don't talk about exchange. Let me show how business schools teach children. Every company I have gone to has a war room strategy. They all have war rooms. What do you sell? Toilet paper. Why do you need a war room? We want a war room because I want to penetrate the market, crush the competition, capture the consumer, grab market share, dominate the industry. Look at the language being used. So much of violence. When did business become war? Who made business war? How did business become war? Nobody has asked this question. Every business school is teaching the children of the world, the next generation of entrepreneurs, how to kill. Of course, you'll say it's metaphor. Metaphor. Couldn't you find any other metaphor? What is this obsession with penetrating, grabbing, crushing? This is toxic masculinity out there. We start celebrating this violence and we wonder why the world is an unhappy place. Our language is violent. When you're here to trade, to do business, business should bring joy, should bring happiness. You have to give in order to receive. Bakasura is not giving any joy to anyone, but yes, he's the market leader. Everybody is terrified of him and everybody gives him what he wants. He has complete monopoly. Bhima is adding value and taking value in exchange. He's giving and receiving. And he's grateful there is a Bakasura out there. Because as long as a Bakasura exists, business will do well. And there'll always be Bakasuras in the world. But we don't think like that. Business schools don't talk this language. We teach our children to be violent. We are not telling them, bring value. We are telling, be violent, be aggressive. We will use these words. We do not realize it is possible to do business by exchanging. Because business is transaction. At the end of the day, business is you give me something, I give you something. Both have to succeed. If somebody tells me, Dev, that the eastern part of India is not doing so well, I'm like, ask yourself, what are you giving the customer? Nobody is doing anybody a favor in dhanda, in business. Business, nobody does favor to anybody. You give me value and I give you value. Customer wants predictability. Do you give me predictability? What do you give in order to get? Give in order to get. We don't talk this language. We are only talking about market penetration, market domination. It's like plunderers and raiders. We want to raid people. And why? Because business schools, what is the origin of business schools? The ideas of the business school have come from the East India Company. All the business school ideas have come from the East India Company. And this part of the world knows what the East India Company did to our country. And East India Company got its idea from the Roman military. And the Roman military plundered the Mediterranean to build Rome. And we use that as the model. Even today, you have countries using military strategy. Corner, the negotiation systems, everything is based on military. You know, Sun Tzu wrote The Art of War because he was actually fighting a real war in China. The business school said, no, that is very good for business. Let's teach our children the art of war. I have people telling me, sir, Chanakya Niti seekhenge, Chanakya. And I'm like, acha, what value did Chanakya give and to whom? And nobody knows the answer to this. Nobody knows the answer to this. Because we are talking, if you read the Chanakya Niti, he's only talking about the king's growth. He's not talking about the people's growth. He just assumes the king is going to give some benefits to the people. We have to ask fundamental questions in life. How do we bring value into each other's lives? How do countries bring values into each other's lives? It's not about balance of trade. It is not about, and am I talking theory? So let me give you an example of cultures that thrived and succeeded by exchange. So long ago, now we are famous in this part of the world to say our culture is 5,000 years old, right? It's famous, even if evidence doesn't provide anything. But 4,500 years ago, they found, 4,500 years ago, people found these artifacts in Egypt. They went to ancient Egypt and they found Lapis Lazuli in the king's tomb. So ancient Egypt, famous for its pyramids. When were the pyramids built? They were built in 2500 BCE, that is 4,500 years ago. And in the pyramids, they found these artifacts which contained lapis lazuli. Where is lapis lazuli found in the world? First question. And you realize it's not found in Egypt for sure. It is found in faraway Afghanistan. How did lapis lazuli from Afghanistan make its way to Egypt? And after years of research, they realized from Afghanistan, lapis lazuli would travel down the Indus River. In the Harappan cities, they would be turned into beads, so it's easy to carry, measure, quantify, regulate. It would come down, travel along the Persian coast, and travel all the way to ancient Egypt for sales, for trade. And what was the currency then? Cowrie shells. I don't know how many of you all know Hindi in this room, but have you heard of ek phudi kaudi nahi dunga? This word kaudi actually was currency before the Portuguese destroyed the kaudi economy in the 16th century. Kaudi is available only in Maldives. And it is this kauri which was used in Harappa to trade. Now what is unique about Harappa is that this city survived for 700 years. It was a Bronze Age civilization. 700 years and not a trace of an army. No army. So Egypt had armies, Mesopotamia had armies, there are images of war and violence. You go to Harappa, no army, no weapons, absolutely no army, no weapons, no images of war. But they were trading, they were mercantile people. Why? How did they manage to survive for 700 years without war? Why is nobody asking this question? Because they said, we have to prevent raiding and we have to do trading. Not raiding, but trading. I don't have to steal your money. I will exchange wealth with you. And they traded with all their neighbors. All their neighbors. They found them trading with each and every neighborhood of Harappa. They have trade. But this is not taught in schools. We don't teach mercantile history in schools. We teach military history in schools. Because you know what, in a war we want to be hero. But life is about trading and exchanging, of giving value and receiving value. And these are ideas that we need to share with the world. Clock says it is measurable, predictable for me. But cloud tells me that it is going to bring rain to everybody. It is not about seeing the time, it is about seeing the clouds and making sure everybody has enough food in their house. Because if you have food and I have food, I won't fight. We all know that it is extremely difficult to argue when you have had a good meal. And if you want to sign a deal, make sure it's after lunch. You cannot sign a deal before lunch. Everybody loves to eat. Make sure everybody eats. In this part of the world, they'll always check, bhat khasho. Have you eaten rice? Have you eaten? Why is bhat important? Because if you have eaten, the chances of you fighting and wanting to penetrate the market will be less. You will exchange, you will trade. So let's figure out ways in which we can trade with each other. And that's what mythology teaches us. We can imagine a world where business is not war. And I think that is what good business is about. How do I genuinely take away the anxieties of my customers, my partners, my investors? How do I not add to the anxiety? That's the whole point. The whole point is to be happy and to be content and to have enough money, not go on Twitter and be a fool. That's the point. And I think that's what we need to figure out. How can business bring joy to the world? Not to be great. I don't want to be great. I want to be happy. Let's make our neighborhood happy. Let's begin in the neighborhood. If you can't make your neighbor happy, you are not going to solve global problems. America doesn't make its neighbors happy. Europe doesn't make its neighbors happy. Is India making its neighbors happy? These are questions to ask. Unless we ask those questions, if your neighborhood doesn't like you, why will they protect you? You want your neighbors to fight for you, support you. That is what we need to create, ecosystem of exchange. And I think we have to look at our culture and ask ourselves, how did we survive with so much of diversity in this land? How did we survive without fighting? There's always going to be a fight. There's always going to be an argument, but we don't have to go to war. And I think that's what I think is being in the middle. We do not have to ape the West. And you are not just East, you are East of the East. You have to teach the world how to bring rice into everyone's life. Thank you. I think we have about 10-15 minutes for questions. If you have any questions, I can answer. Yes, sir.
Mr. Pattanaik, thank you very much for a very nice session. You see, I quite liked your interpretation of the Bhagavad Gita. I've read your book. I'm curious to know about your personal views on the concept of rebirth, your personal views on that.
You see, what does rebirth mean? Rebirth is a code for diversity. Is a code for diversity. I'm giving you a shorthand answer and a quick answer. Rebirth is everybody has come from a different place and therefore everybody thinks differently. When you think you live only one life and think of it as a concept, then you have only one chance. And you want to live this one chance perfectly because you'll not get a second chance, and therefore there's a lot of anxiety. Ek hi life hai, ek hi life. I want to achieve it perfectly. And therefore your anxiety levels are very high. And you have no patience with anyone else because you have only one life. But the moment you say, I have many lives, and that everybody around me has many lives, and everybody comes from a different place, my relationship is very different with my own life and people around me. I don't expect them to be like me, so I don't try to convince them, I don't argue with them. I work with them. And I am also not anxious. I will try my best to win, but if I don't win, phal ki chinta mat karo. Even God doesn't give guarantee in the Gitas. One of the things about the Bhagavad Gita is God says, I will never give you guarantee. And that's a very, look at the statement. I'm not guaranteeing your work will work, but you have to work. Because that's the only, you have no choice. Or choice kya hai? It's like telling the deer, you have to run. There is no guarantee the lion won't catch you. Right? But you have to run because otherwise you have no hope of survival. So that's the game so that is how rebirth is to be seen. It's not to be seen like a clock problem. It has to be seen, it is a cloud. It's a world of cloud. That's why I use these words. I found that this differentiation, very simple way to explain this. These are philosophical ideas that help you shape your relationship with people. Yes, sir.
My question is that, I got it. My question is that you talked about a very interesting session, and you talked about the war or the battle being introduced by the West and which we have adopted. Then why is that despite Ramayana and Mahabharata being written much before, let's say, Homer's Iliad or Odyssey, all these four epics, the top four epics that we consider globally, are all culminating into wars? I mean, when you look at Ramayana, it's all about, mostly about the war between Rama and Ravan.
Yes.
When we talk about Mahabharata, mostly people, what they recall, though Mahabharata is a very fascinating, and diverse, story, but ultimately it boils down to Kurukshetra. So, what are your thoughts about that?
So, these books were written, see, when they're talking about war, they're not selling the war. The problem is how we talk about Ramayana and Mahabharata today is we are selling the war and the victory. So nowadays when I listen to people writing novels on Ramayana and Mahabharata, they are selling the war. They are becoming lawyers. He was right, that was right, this was right. They're using right and they're talking like lawyers. They're talking like judges. Mahabharata and Ramayana does not talk about war. It talks about the consequences of war. The hero of Ramayana lives a miserable life and dies alone without family. The hero of the Mahabharata watches everything collapse around him. There are 6 chapters after the war which was not shown by B.R. Chopra in the Mahabharata. Because he said TRP rating nahi aayega. Because we want the climax of the war. We don't want to see the anti-climax after the war. No war has given happiness to anyone in the world. But plundering, we like plunder. We love plunder. Neither Ramayana nor Mahabharata are stories of plunder. The Trojan War is a story of plunder. Trojan War is a story of plunder. Troy is plundered. But all of them come back to unhappy lives. All of them, not one of them. There is the book which is lost, it's called The Returns. Is an unhappy story of what happens when they return home. Wives have taken lovers, nobody remembers them, people have forgotten them, it's finished. They've come back after war 10 years later and nobody remembers. The sons are dead, wives are dead, nobody remembers. So this glamorization of war, which happens, and my problem is we are turning business into war. Business is about value proposition. There are many other ways of imagining business. You can imagine the business as a kitchen. I cook great food to feed my customers. The better quality food, the more customers come. It's a restaurant. It's a restaurant, good quality food. You can use the metaphor of the restaurant to explain business, everything of business. Why the metaphor of war? Why this toxic masculine metaphor? Why can't business be a kitchen? Is it too feminine? Is it not joyful? Because both parties are happy, khana khao, enjoy. There's so many metaphors that you can use, but we don't do that. So my problem is this, we don't realize the psychological, I want to win, this triumphalism. Win for what? I mean, this is the next quarter going to come up again, and another quarter is going to come up again. Everything is becoming about victory. And that's the problem. It's how we look at business. And it's not healthy for businesses. But if I look at business saying, what am I paros kya raha hu? Forgive me, what am I serving? What is my value proposition? What am I serving? What is the product I'm giving to the customer? Is he getting indigestion because of it? Is it such a terrible product that they're dying? So now I'm the same thing, but I'm now looking at it differently. I'm looking at the same business, and I've done a lot of sessions on sales, where I say, you are master chef. You have to figure out which ingredients, when you're selling a product, ki, acha, sir, ye kar sakte hain, ye bhi kar sakte hain, ye bhi kar. It's like a doctor saying that, acha, you have got weight problems, I will tell you this food to eat. You can eat everything, and that's the products I bring. So you can look at sales in a different way. We don't have to use the war metaphor. Otherwise, you have all these crazy people right now who say they'll save the world through war. You never save the world through war. And that's the tragedy that we are facing.
I have
2 questions. I'll take this question and I'll take that question.
Okay. What is the relevance of religion in today's world? And my second question is again related.
One question.
Okay.
Relevance of, it's your truth. So if you think it is relevant, great. It mobilizes people. Religion mobilizes people. It's great for votes. So if you want to win an election, you better have religion on your side. Right? It binds people together. You want to control a neighborhood, you use religion. So religion is a very powerful technology that humans have created to bind people together. That's all. It helps creating a community, a tribe. But it will never work globally. Because there will be always another competition, and another competition, and another competition, and another. It will bind a group of people. It will never bind every group of people. But it is a very powerful technology. So we should understand it as a technology. It's a great tool At a personal level, it may give you peace. But the moment you start, but really the word religion is used for communities, never used for individuals. We use the word spirituality for individuals, we use religion for communities. So that's how it works. So it is useful, it has a very useful tool, but we should know its limitations. When does it not work? In an interpersonal relationship, it won't work. Interpersonal relationship, it never works. So interpersonal relationship, you have to read Devdutt Pattanaik.
Thank you. So I want to go back to your example from the Bhagavad Gita, where you talk about the fact that God never said he'll give you a guarantee. Krishna Bhagwan, when he said to Arjun that apna karam karo, phal ki ichha mat karo, phal mujh pe chhod do. Right? So that created hope in the mind of Arjun. And that's what drives everything on this earth. Whether we talk about religion, we talk about anything else. If you take away hope, then
hope
itself is a big problem.
That I can hear your pain. But you see, before, imagine going to your sales guy and says, whether you achieve the target or not, I will give you bonus. We are talking about phal ki chinta, no? He knows that unless he achieves the target, he won't get the bonus. Usually people talk about Bhagavad Gita just before appraisals. To deal with the people who don't get the promotions, who don't get the bonuses, because that's when exodus happens, that's when I make my most business. And typically people say, sir, because we have assumed Bhagavad Gita is a motivational speech. Never read the Bhagavad Gita without reading the Mahabharata. Because at the end of the war, Arjun wins the war, loses his children. It's like the successful CEO whose children don't talk to him. Phal ki chinta mat karo. I gave you your success, not your happiness. There's a very famous line of Chanakya saying, Maine kaha tha tumhe raja banaunga, I'll make you the king. I did not say you will be happy. You were so your target was, I want to be a king. You assumed kingship will bring you happiness. No. That I'm not giving you. The clock problem is making you a king. Being happy is a cloud problem. So we have to be very clear. The problem with this text is, otherwise I would be wearing those saffron robes and giving you those easy lectures and lazy lectures. Tough lectures, you don't need those saffron robes. Because you have to give what the meanings are. Refine it, because we are talking to intelligent people. It's a cloud problem. And that's what Bhagavad Gita is telling you. I'm giving you hope, but I have to also cope with hopelessness. एक दिन कुछ नहीं होगा तुम्हारे पास. How do you manage at that time? वहां पे भी भगवद गीता पढ़ना पड़ता है. So that is it. You have to read it when you succeed and when you fail. And when success seems like failure. Or when failure starts looking like success. So those are the complexities which come in the story. Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
We'll take two questions, 1 and 2. And then we'll have to wind up. We have 3 minutes.
Okay, you've answered a lot of my questions in the past. Thank you for that, Siza. So, a real life problem in business today I'm from Singapore, look after Asia Pacific. One of the problems we face in a global company is how do you translate your world in Asia Pacific to an American bred leadership style, okay? Now, leaders are very comfortable talking about pumpkin pies and Thanksgiving.
Yes.
While they have a predominant employees in this part of the world struggle to even wish people on Diwalis. Is there any crack code, that we could use to really tell our stories better so that it gets a bit more integrated?
I think we have to listen to, everybody knows how to motivate each other in their own ways. And I think we don't invest enough time to understand what the customer wants. I'll give you an example. I knew this one IT company in India which had special workshops for its sales team on baseball. Because they said, you are going to do business with Americans. If you don't know baseball, they won't talk to you. I think when you're going to Vietnam, you need to understand what Vietnam wants. If you want to work in Bangladesh, you have to understand what Bangladesh wants. You want to work in Pakistan, you have to understand what Pakistan wants. What Nepal, you have to understand what Nepal wants. We don't invest enough time in that soft part. And I think that's where the magic really happens. You talk to the old Marwadi traders of Calcutta, they all speak perfect Bengali. Why? Otherwise, market needs Bengali, so I have to speak Bengali. I may come from Marwad, but I will eat my own food. I won't eat macher jhol, but I'll get the best cooks to prepare macher jhol for my customer. But I will not eat it because, my rules don't allow it. But I'll speak Bengali, I'll make you comfortable. And that's how the Marwadi business community in Calcutta thrived. They understood their market. We'll take this last question, sir, and then if I'm permitted. And hi, sir.
Question is, you give this talk at business schools, as you mentioned. What about the teachers who teach all the students about the war room games and strategies?
You see, this is
Have you ever lectured the teachers?
Well, I try to, but you see what has happened is this is the standardized meme that is going around the world. And this has taken me about 10 years of working with the business community where I kept wondering what is wrong, because I worked with some of the most richest and powerful men in India, and I found all of them were unhappy. All of them. I mean, my favorite moment was I am in a private jet where someone is telling me, who owns the private jet, life is unfair. And I'm like, yes, sir, life is unfair. Because my invoice is on his table, so I have to agree with him. But I'm like, I'm in this private jet, not a tiny private jet. It's like a massive thing. And it's one of his many jets. And he's telling me, life is unfair. I'm like, oh, okay, fine. And I realized the conversation has to change. This is thinking out of the box. You have to challenge the views. And the thing which struck me is everybody is using the language of violence in business. And business has nothing to do with violence. It is, we have to look at business differently, and there are models to look at it differently. So we have to ask this question. Business is not war. War happens when business fails, when negotiations fail, when exchange fails. I give you, you give me. You bring joy to my life and I bring joy. You bring me great services. I'm so happy when I buy my phone and the software works. There's so much joy in buying products and goods and services. So I think we need to re-look at the language of business. So yeah, business teachers can call me. I will tell you my fee. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
That's Mr. Devdutt Pattanaik for you. Another huge round of applause, please, for Mr. Devdutt Pattanaik. Thank you. That was a brilliant deliberation. Loved hearing every word that you spoke, and we wish we could have just listened to you forever. May I request Mr. Dhruba Mukherjee, CEO of AVP Private Limited, and Mr. Kripaduti Sarkar, Group CEO of Ambuja Neotia, to kindly come on stage to present mementos to Mr. Devdutt Pattanaik. Thank you very much.